There's lots of different problems with the engine. It could be that the spark plugs are fouled. It could be that it's not receiving fuel. It could be that it doesn't get air. The air filters. You can say, well, it could be all these different things. But if the problem is specific to that motor, then the solution it's as specific as the problem. Does this make sense? So that's a question we have to ask about the world religions. If the problems are, if there's no uniqueness to the problems, you could imagine that 100 different solutions would work because there's 100 different problems. But if the problem is unique, then it would make sense that the solution is unique. So on Christianity, the problem is that we are, here's God, and here's us. And there is this unbridgeable chasm between us that has been created by our sin. So then the solution to this problem is you somehow have to bridge over a sin problem. Now, how many ways are there to bridge a sin problem? Okay, well, so this is fascinating because we know this already because every single person in this room has had a broken relationship. And if it's true that God is personal, we already talked about that. Like God's not an impersonal force. He's not like the energy behind the universe. He's not a mathematical principle. God is a person. And if God is a person and we're people and we have a broken relationship caused by our sin, well, we know how to fix that. Because if I have a problem with you, because I sinned against you, let's say let's say I owe James $10,000. Well, actually, I stole it from him. Actually, he's got this amazing safe, by the way. He's a billion-pound safe. He's got all his money. But I managed to figure out how to get inside to get all his valuables. And I just thought I was just going to test it out to do it. And then I was in there, and actually, beyond the really cool gun he's got in there, there's also a bunch of money, and I took it. And he found out, and I said, oh, my gosh. And I was now under huge conviction. And now we've got a real problem because James is looking at me like, dude, you violated me. You violated my stuff. You violated my home. Who's all been stolen from before, by the way? Like crime. Oh, yeah. Violation, right? You feel violated. Okay, but we were friends before this. And we got a problem. Okay, there's two ways to get this fixed. One way is I'm just going to earn it. I'm just going to work it off. I'm going to fix the hole in his safe. I'm going to give him all the money back. That's like number one. And I'm going to, give him his... So I'm going to do everything I can to try to earn my way back to his favor. And now I've kind of earned my way back to friendship. Okay, that's one way to get it done. The other way is he looks at me and he forgives me. He just decides that he's going to forgive me. Now, in the situation where he forgives me, does the debt just go away? What happens to it?
He has to absorb it.
He has to take it.
My money's still gone.
His money's still gone. He absorbs the debt. He takes the hit. It's on him. Okay? So there's two ways. Now, here's what Christianity believes about world religions, to get right at your question. It believes that all of these other ways, though very different in the particulars, in the general, are exactly the same. And every single one of them is a way of earning. Every single one. So, for example, let's look at the specifics. In Buddhism, you got to live the Four Noble Truths. Right? What is that? Oh, the Four Noble Truths? Well, I'll summarize them. It revolves this idea that, number one, all life is suffering. And then if you can get out of suffering by extinguishing desire, that's basically how it goes. I've skipped a step, but that's it. So life is suffering. The way to reach nirvana, enlightenment, is to eliminate suffering in your life. And the way to eliminate suffering is to eliminate desire. There, I think I got them all. So basically the end of Buddhism is no more desire. If you don't want anything, you'll never suffer. Why would you never suffer? Because you don't want anything. Okay, that's the solution in Buddhism. To get to no desire, you have to follow the Eightfold Path. Right action, right thinking, there's a bunch of them. There's eight of them. 8 rights. Right action, right thought, right, lots of things. Someone could look that up. Okay, under Islam, you've got the 5 pillars. And the first thing you got to do is recite the Shahada. There's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. You got to make the Hajj, which is a once-in-a-lifetime journey to Mecca. You've got to give the alms. That's 1/40th of your income. You've got to say your prayers 5 times a day, and there's a 5th. And the 6th is jihad. Okay? So there's your 5-fold path. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In Hinduism, it's not as neat as these others, but it's you have to basically pursue enlightenment, and you have to get off the wheel of samsara, which is karma. So you have to work off your bad karma. So everyone understands karma, right? Okay.
What goes around comes around.
What goes around comes around. So everyone is locked in samsara. Some people think, reincarnation. Well, yeah, that's it. So reincarnation. So you're constantly reincarnated in the next life into what you deserved from this life. So if you get reincarnated as an ant, you were maybe Hitler or something like that. It didn't go well for you, And then you work your way up from lower life forms up to higher life forms through good action, good karma. You get good karma, it follows you into the next life, next life, next life, and you think, reincarnation, the Americanized reincarnation is ridiculous because we think of reincarnation as heaven. Oh, I'll be reincarnated as Cleopatra. No, okay? In Hinduism, reincarnation is hell. It's not heaven. The fact that you would be reincarnated in lifetime is hell in Hinduism. You are released from this when you enter into enlightenment. And then in Buddhism, it's like you get absorbed into the all. And that's like being extinguished. You're extinguished basically, like it's described as like a drop falls in the ocean. And you've reached nirvana and you're gone. Your personality, by the way, is part of suffering. That's why you suffer, is because you think of yourself as distinct from the universe. Okay, so is this making sense? Now, it's all different in the particulars, but in the general, you can see it's all the same. It's climb the mountain. Climb the mountain. Okay, so in Christianity, it's different because the direction is backwards. This is the earning thing. I pay James back. This is James forgives me. And the direction is grace. This is earning. Every other way is earning. In Christianity, it's grace. Grace is God's work coming down. This is our work trying to achieve something going up.
So he meets us where we're at instead of us meeting our next destination where it's at. He
Correct.
comes down to meet us
Correct.
Where we're currently at.
Yes. The difference here is because this is your action. When can you know you've got it? Can you know you got it? I got it. Enlightenment. I did it. Generally, people who think they got it are the worst people among us, not the best. Right? They're not the best people. But if God's action initiates this, then can you know you got it? You can know you got it. James.
So I'll just ask what I predict will be his follow-up question. That
Yeah.
sounds great, Pastor Rick.
Yeah.
Like grace sounds really good. But how do I know? How would I evaluate that any of these other books, like the Book of Mormon, like the Quran, like other religious documents and methods, how do I evaluate those against Christianity? How do I know which ones are accurate and which ones aren't?
Oh, that's a great question. So,
Based on the elephant thing.
well, let's look at that elephant illustration, because if the elephant is saying, okay, what's the elephant saying? The elephant is saying they all got it right. Buddhism got some of it right. Islam got some of it right. Hinduism's got some of it right. Christianity's got some of it right. Okay. The premise is that God is just so big and wonderful that no one system could possibly capture him. But the question of the elephant is always about the person who's observing the elephant, right? So who is it that can see that all the world religions are just touching a piece of God? Just a piece here, just a piece here, just a piece here. Who is it that sees that? That person, whoever that person is, has to be outside the system. In other words, they're not blind. These people, the illustration says this person is only touching a piece of God. Why just a piece and not the whole? Well, because they're blind, right? How about this person? Just a piece. Well, how do you know they don't have it? Like, they don't have it down. Like, it's like, yeah, that's it. They've got the system. They understand. No, because they're blind. This person, blind. This person, blind. Who knows that they're blind?
Whoever drew the picture.
Whoever drew the picture. Exactly. In the ancient Indian version of this, it's a king who's seeing this. So there's a king who has this outside perspective because the king sees. Okay? So the premise of the illustration presumes that that person sees. So so ironically, it's kind of a very magnanimous. Every religion has a piece of the truth, and maybe that's true. But the person who says that is actually very arrogant. Why are they arrogant? Because they think they know that everyone only has a piece. Like, how do you know? How do you know? Are you the king who sees all these people groping away at the elephant? Yeah, I'm a king. I'm outside all those pathetic people who follow all the religions of the world. And the moral relativists, whoops, sorry, just scratching away here. The religious relativists that are scratching away trying to paw at God are just such children, so blind. Logan.
I gotta wonder about the mountain analogy.
Yeah.
Can both of them be right, both earning and grace? Because to come down the mountain, you have to climb it first.
I think that there's something about the fact that we're built to climb the mountain. We are. So I would say this, nobody comes into the Christian faith, almost nobody would come into the Christian faith who hasn't done some version of this. Because doing this is the only thing that will expose your inability. The people who try to earn are often the people who will come to the end of themselves. And the great examples are like from church history, like, for example, Paul himself. His pedigree, man, is awesome. I mean, as far as his earning pedigree, like 10 Commandments. Here's his own assessment of himself. As to legalistic righteousness, in other words, the law of Moses and following all the stuff, washing his hands appropriately, following the moral commandments, everything. He said, faultless. So he's just an earning guy. I mean, he is absolutely like a premier moral performer. And he comes to the end of himself. And he just comes to the end and he realizes, I can't earn enough. And when he gets there, now he's ready for grace. And the same thing, Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a priest in the Roman Catholic Church, and he obeyed all the Catholic Church's teachings about diet and about fast days and about everything, confession and going to services. And ironically, guess what? This is amazing. Can you believe that there were priests in the Catholic Church who didn't read the Bible? True story. Menno Simons, Martin Luther, several of these guys had gone 10 years in the church teaching the doctrines of the church, working the church through the sacraments, and had never read the Bible. So Martin Luther, this priest who had never read the Bible, but had, with all of his effort, tried to earn his way into being a good priest and earning God's favor, and then all of a sudden he opened up the Bible and he said, for by grace you've been saved, through faith, and this is not of yourselves. This is the gift of God, so that no one can boast. And it's like, mind blown. Mind blown. Because, yeah, I think you're right, Logan. He comes to grace through that process of earning, because that's what gets you to the end of yourself. People who just say, yeah, I'm a good person. If you listen to people and they talk like this, yeah, I'm a good person. It's like, they've never tried. And because they just assume, and often if you live in the West, you have a lot of money, you can insulate yourself from your own suffering. You can, your actions do bad things, but your money can protect you from the consequences of your bad character, and you think you're a pretty good dude. Those people have no clue, and they generally then will never discover grace. But when you come to the end of yourself, and that what you say, why is it so often that people become Christians at the lowest part of their life? This is why. They get to the end of the earning trail and realize that they've still got this, this far to go. And they come to the end of themselves. And then they hear a message. It's in combination. I've come to the end of myself, and then they heard, oh, God will forgive me? Yeah. Now, this hopefully makes the cross make sense, because what's happening at the cross? We said, how does James forgive me? He forgives me only on pain of his own suffering. He will suffer in order to forgive me. Well, you say, well, why did there have to be blood? Ugh. Christians talk a lot about blood. Crucifixion. There's a dead guy hanging on a cross in front of every church you've probably ever been to. What's going on there? God is taking on the debt. And to do that, he now says to the world, there's a way of grace. It's brand new. It's unique. It's unique in all the palette of world religions. It's unique. It's the way of grace. I will pay, not you. Does that make sense? What do you think, James? Junior? What do you think? Is that making sense? Okay.
So how would somebody evaluate Christianity's truth claims against, say, this probably goes to the first question on the world religion.
Yeah, it's probably more about like their holy books and like how can I trust them, right?
Yeah. So what would Junior, I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah.
What would somebody like Junior do in order to evaluate these things?
So what you can do is you can look at these other texts. The first thing you're going to find is that there's not a lot of religions actually that have Bibles. Most people don't know that. Like, for example, the Hindu Vedas are not considered inerrant or inspired in the same way that Christians consider the Bible to be inspired. The Hindu Vedas are not tied to historical events. So it's really hard to test them except to look at them against like their statements versus like known facts. Like, for example, the Vedas thinks that the moon shines with its own light and that it makes scientific statements that are obviously false. Okay. Islam is almost all one guy talking from a cave. And that's it. That's Islam. And then Buddhism is not Mahatma Gandhi, Siddhartha Buddha, who lives in about 600 BC. He comes out of Hinduism. So I don't know if you knew that, but Buddhism is a flow out of Hinduism. And he's very dissatisfied with the caste system that has come out of Hinduism, but he accepts most of Hinduism's teachings. But then he adds this you can see it's very logical and it has a flow to it. And he adds structure to basic pantheism. But Buddhism sacred text, I'm not even sure what their sacred text, what's the name of the Buddhist sacred text? I don't think they have one, and not near. So only Islam and Christianity have sacred texts along with Judaism that have the same authority in the life of the believer and that are actually tied in some way to history. Islam, of course, has actually got no stories in it. It's just got one-way communication from the angel Gabriel, who receives revelation from Allah, to Muhammad. And so one of the things you can say is when Islam speaks on things that you do know something about, you can say, does it get it right? So Islam talks a lot about Jesus because it shows up 600 years after Jesus, right? 600 AD. 620 is when. So when it talks about Jesus, then you sort of compare it and you cross-references it to what the Bible says. The Bible's 600 years older, and the Bible therefore much closer to the events, and it probably has the right story. And when this story is different, you say, oh my goodness, it looks like Muhammad got his story about Jesus all along. So you can do some evaluation that way. Are we getting close? And though, without getting into the weeds of the different holy texts, what you can do is look at them and say, what are the reasons I have to believe this text based on what I can confirm from outside? So if it says something about science, like something about the world is obviously false, that's not a mark in its favor, right? If it says something about history that's obviously false, that's not a mark in its favor. And for Book of Mormon, by the way, also throw that in the pile. So the Book of Mormon is a great example. You look at the Book of Mormon, and it makes massive claims about Native Americans. Did you know that? So the basic claim is that the Native American population are actually Semites, which means they're Jews. You say, where did the Jews come from? They came from ancient Israel. Remember I said that Assyria had gobbled up the northern country? The lost 10 tribes of Israel, Mormonism says, got in a boat, went across the Atlantic Ocean and landed in the Americas in 600 BC and started a thriving civilization. Okay, well, that's an historic claim. You can test it. And when we test this claim, it just doesn't hold any water. You can't find a red shekel. Their battle sites are, you can't find the battle sites archaeologically. And then genetically, like then we can study like Native Americans' genome, and it looks like they're Mongolians genetically. They're not Semites. In other words, they didn't come from the Middle East. They came from Asia. So these are marks, right? So you can test. What you can test, same thing with the Bible. So Luke says, in the year when Tiberius was Caesar and blah, 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 and you go, well, was there a Tiberius? Check. Was there a guy named Quirinius? Yes. Like he talks about the Christmas story, all the world was taxed. Can you test that? Did the Roman world tax its citizens? Yes. He says there was a proconsul of this city. Is that what they called their city officials? Yes. You say, well, how do you know that? Well, we compare it to other things we know from other sources. So it's this cross-check thing. So, Junior, you can do that with every religious text. So you can cross-check it with what we know from history, archaeology, science. And when you do that, boy, you're just going to be blown away by the Bible. So good question. Do we get there? What do you think? Any follow-up on that stuff? There's a big question. So the elephant illustration is, it's magnanimous on one level, right? All the religions have some truth. And I'm certain that that's true. I believe that. I believe there's truth in Islam. I believe that there's truth in Hinduism and Buddhism. By the way, Buddhism has stumbled on a really important idea. This idea that desire leads to suffering. Absolutely. So the Bible, kind of affirms all this. But the difference in Buddhism is eliminate desire, which basically ends in eliminating you. That's how it ends. Christianity is different. It says, oh yeah, your desires are broken and disturbed, and your affections for things that are not God are the very reason why you suffer. So the problem is not getting rid of desire, it's changing your desires. And God changes the heart to change our desires for the things that last and the things that satisfy ultimately with God himself. So absolutely, there's truths in all these religions. C.S. Lewis says it like this. The atheist has to take a very illiberal position. They have to believe that 95% of the world is wrong, fundamentally wrong about the most fundamental facts about the universe. But he says Christianity can take a more liberal view. And the view is something like this. We can agree with all these different religious perspectives on things, but where they disagree with Jesus, there we disagree with them. And that's just the law of non-contradiction, right? Like a thing cannot be both A and B in the same time, the same relationship at the same time, right? The Space Needle, the statement, the Space Needle is in Paris and the Space Needle is in Seattle are contradictory statements. The statement on Buddhism is God is impersonal, and the statement of the Bible, God is personal, are contradictory statements. So where they contradict, you have to make a choice. You can't say, they're both right. That doesn't work. Logan.
Pretty sure there's no God in Buddhism.
Right. Like Buddhism is very agnostic. You're right. Buddhism is very agnostic about the God question, but it does flow from Hinduism, which is more developed on the God idea. I think what I would say is Siddhartha Buddha just had no reason to quibble with the Hindu vision of God, which, by the way, is impersonal and just sort of the divine essence of all things. It was the divine energy of all things. And so that's a very impersonal, the universe is God view, and the Christian view is no, the universe is not God. Okay, so now again, you have a choice to make, and you can evaluate the claims based on evidence. All right, we've said a lot there. I want to know if we've gone over your head or we've made it make more sense or less. James, for a friend, is there a follow-up?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. All right, good. So I appreciate it. That's a great conversation, and I don't know if we should keep going now with Mormons, since that's where we're at. Do you want to do that since we started?
Sure.
Yeah, Diane says, let's go there. Okay, so are Mormons considered Christian? Well, take a look. Joseph Smith's first vision accounts. James has kind of put a couple of notes in here. James, I'll just let you also make a comment here if you want to just jump in. But his first revelation is basically from the prophet Moroni. It says, all of the denominations are abominations, and their pastors, preachers, practitioners are, what's the word? I don't even know the word. False, apostate, yes.
So the gist of it is that when you look at his earlier account, if memory serves, in the first account, he didn't mention the Trinity. He just got a vision from an angel. And then as fast forward a couple years, and he had other accounts, and it sort of changed over time. Until eventually it was, no, he had a direct visitation from Jesus and God the Father and the Holy Spirit at the same time. But the overlying message for all four was pretty much the same, which was, like, there's a different speaker telling him this, but ultimately the message is, you should not join any of these denominations. You should create your own because they are all wrong, and we need you to set it right, Joseph.
Yes. So there's a bit of a feeling in the popular culture, because everyone knows a Mormon friend, and I know some too, very nice people, generally. And there's a sense in which Mormons want to be called Christians. They want to be part of the club. And what's wild about that is if you do a little study and you realize, as James said, they started by kicking us out of the club. Us. The rest of Christendom. So Joseph Smith, by revelation of Moroni, the angel Moroni, kicked us all out of the club. We all got kicked out of the club. So in some sense, this feeling like, well, why do we kick the Mormons out of the club? Stop, hold it. They kicked us out of the club. They, that is to say Joseph Smith, kicked the rest of Christendom out of the club.
By the way, if you got the digital version of this questionnaire, their links are actually included. You can actually read the four accounts. And they're all taken from the Joseph Smith Papers, which is an official LDS, like Mormon website. That, so it's not like I took them out of other people's stuff.
Yes, very good. So as far as Mormonism then and Christianity, here's what I'll say, and this may be controversial in this room, but Mormonism obviously has the Bible, and they have it. They teach from it. It's superseded by Book of Mormon, Pearl of Great Price, Doctrine and Covenants. So that means it's covered in layers of, I would consider, error. But there is still the Scripture, and there is still some of the same language and verbiage and doctrines and teachings. Yeah. Joseph Smith is the guy who started Mormonism. Do you know a Mormon? Do you know a Mormon? Like any students in high school? Yeah. So they belong, so the Mormon friend you know belongs to a church that was started in 1820. It was started by that guy, Joseph Smith. Make sense? And you say, how did it start? It started with him, kind of like Islam. Lots of parallels, by the way. I want to write a book about this. The parallels between Islam and Mormonism, startling. Guy alone in a cave getting revelation from the angel Moroni. And as your dad said, his first vision was, all of the denominations are abominations. That was the first revelation. And then away they went.
Is that angel referenced in the Bible at all?
No, not in that. No, not in that vision. No.
Okay. Please pick the name.
Oh, like as far as the name Moroni?
Yeah.
The name of that, no, that angel's not named in the Bible. No, yeah, he just picked a new name. By the way, Joseph Smith, yeah, he did not lack for creative talent. I mean, that dude he could tell a story. So yeah, he had, think about, if you read the Book of Mormon as just a interesting story, like, again, this will be offensive to your Mormon friends, but just imagine it's a fiction story that someone made up. It's really a fascinating account. So only a really good author could do this. And Joseph Smith was, among other things, a really fantastic spinner of tales. So no, he just made up the names.
Matter of fact, he had glasses that he
Yes.
supposedly look at the gold tablet
Yeah.
in his hat.
Yeah. So they're seer stones, what Ron's talking about. And these seer stones, we often think, they talk about them as spectacles, but they're not spectacles in any way that you would imagine. They weren't see-through like glasses. What they were stones, and then he would put them in a hat, and he would put his face in the hat, and then he would recite Revelation. And then there was someone who was beside him recording it. So that's the way that went down. So that's how we got the Book of Mormon. Now, this was all supposedly off of tablets, and those tablets are lost to us. Joseph Smith said they were sucked up back into heaven. But he did the original translation from golden tablets through the Urim and the Thummim, which are these special, like I said, seer stones. I think it's possible for someone to be a genuine Christian in the Mormon Church. I believe that because they have a Bible and they talk about the salvation of Jesus. They talk about grace. They talk about having faith in him. They have all the same words, but they often mean different things. So there is a denial of our understanding of the Trinity. They believe that God the Father was a corporeal, that is to say a flesh-based person, that he's having sex in heaven with Mary. Like he has a spirit bride in Mary. He creates spirit children, and then those spirits are instantiated in human babies. And your job someday is you will become like God. So the God of this planet, our Father, they would call our Father, he had a son, Jesus. He also had another son named Satan. They're spirit brothers. And of course, Satan rebelled. Jesus did not. But you are like Jesus in this way. And so this idea of divine progression is a real thing in Mormonism. The God that we worship as God was once like you. He was a human, not like Jesus, like human, but like a human, like with no divine pedigree. And he ascended into godhood, and he has his own planet, that's us, and he's making spirit babies. He's populating the world. And you someday, by divine progression, will become like God. If you have a spirit wife, this only applies to males, by the way, then you have a spirit wife, your wife on planet Earth, with whom you were bound eternally in a special ceremony in a Mormon temple, and then you will have spirit babies with her for the rest of eternity and have your own planet, and the cycle will repeat at infinitum. That's the view. That's why people who are in the know about this realize that Mormonism is actually polytheism. So again, if you go all the way down the rabbit hole of in-depth Mormon teaching, you realize that's not Christianity. It's different. It becomes an earning program, actually, and Smith is explicit about that. You're saved by grace after all you can do, I believe is a direct quote from the Book of Mormon. So, but is there enough of the truth in this thing that's been layered with myth and wives' tales and fable that someone could access the truth about the Lord Jesus and be saved? Yeah, I think so. I think that's possible. So, but I think it's like with everything, like we should just be pursuing truth and, yeah. So Lee asked if there a difference between Mormons and LDS, and I looked around on that. I think it's a difference in labeling. There are a bunch of different sects. So obviously there are Orthodox sects, some of them that want to go back to the original polygamous expression of Mormonism, and it's certainly as expressed by Brigham Young. And this is what I did find out, that Smith's wife, his first legitimate wife, desperately wanted to bring Mormonism out of its polygamous expressions. And early on, between Smith and then Brigham Young, after Smith was shot and killed, were absolutely polygamist. And so her name isn't Jessie, what is it? Emma, thank you. Emma Smith kind of had her own little sect, her own little break-off Mormon sect, and she was trying to pull the thing out of this polygamous thing that it was about. So I don't know if we're talking about different Mormon sects, but Latter-day Saints is the term, the preferred term. They will accept the term Mormon, and it's based on the name of the angel Moroni, who gave Joseph Smith the Book of Mormon. So, but if you have a specific distinction you were thinking of, Lee, no? Okay. So let's just keep going on that, and we'll knock these ones out. What's the oldest religion? So Logan, I think this was your question.
No, I sent you.
Oh, it was Deb's. That's right. But you sent me a video about it. Yeah. So the oldest religion, so anthropologists will tell you that it's basically some form of animism. So animism is what is like a default religion. We said that a couple of weeks ago. Animism is the default religion. So you go somewhere that doesn't have these big world religion traditions that have imposed themselves through civilizational development. You're dealing with a primordial culture, still very tied to the land, still very ancient and pre-scientific. 100% they're animists. We've never found, by the way, an atheistic culture. So you don't go to a different place and find, hey, where's the culture that doesn't worship any god? It's like, nah, it doesn't exist. So animism is everywhere. We are, which proves, I guess, one thing, and that's we're just incurably religious. We've never discovered a natural, a primordial culture that was atheistic. Atheism is just a development from Western Christianity. Some people cynically say atheism is just a bunch of Christian heretics. And the reason why they would say that is because almost all modern atheists agree almost lock, stock, and barrel with the Christian moral program. So they believe in human rights, they believe in the specialness of people, but they just don't have a grounding for it. They believe that people are built with inalienable rights. They believe that people are equal before what? So atheism is its own sort of very special, unique outgrowth of, ironically, Christianity. In no other place in the world has it sort of emerged. You get some, like Logan was saying, Buddhism is agnostic, probably you'd almost say, about the God question. Amy.
I thought atheists just basically didn't believe in God.
Well, that's true. They don't. But then you say, okay, well, what are they like generally in the Western world, which is where you find them? And what they believe is the entire program of the Renaissance. They believe in the specialness of the human person. They believe in human rights. They believe in freedom, equality, progress, all these things. And so that program is entirely Christian. So what you see, then you just lop off the God part,
right,
and then just keep going with the moral program.
I had all of those human rights, all that stuff, and I still didn't believe in God but now I do.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more I just didn't have a belief of God. I still believed in those other
Yes,
things,
yes.
but I just I couldn't identify with the understanding of God.
Right. And so one of the things that brings people back to God is they look at the things that God belief did, like flowers.
Right.
And then you say, okay, freedom, equality, human rights, democracy, the whole thing, right? Science, the whole thing. And then you chop off God, you realize that that was probably the source of this thing. And then as you see in a modern world, even commitments to science are becoming like flaky and subjective and feelings driven, and the flowers wilt. So one of the things that was bringing people back to God is when you see that some of the best parts of the Western project starting to die, starting to wilt, and you realize what's different. Well, we've chopped it off from its moorings, its source in Christian soil. And by the way, this argument I'm making has been made beautifully by a guy named Tom Holland. He's a historian, and he writes the book Dominion. So Tom Holland, and he's not a Christian, but he writes as a person who just says, oh, wait a minute, this entire Western project is a Christian project, and we've kind of mislabeled it. We've labeled it a Renaissance project. And he's saying, no, actually, it's not. And it's certainly not, like, it doesn't go back to the Roman era, the Greek era. He says those values are as different from us as we are from, like, Mars. It's like we wouldn't even recognize the moral world as a moral world, as the Roman world as a moral world. We would consider it to be evil. Tom Holland, the book is Dominion. And again, non-Christian historian, but he writes profoundly about the impact of Christianity on the West. And he what do I want to say? He's scared, is that the right word? He trembles at the future of a West cut from its source. Let's put it like that.
You see the results everywhere now.
You can. And I think partly, Ron, that's what's bringing a wave of interest, renewed interest in Christianity.
Especially amongst the young people.
Yes.
They're tired of things that are not true.
Yes. Yep. Agreed. Okay, so this is really good. So animism, but I will say this, Deb, and if you look more deeply into it than just the superficial, there is accounts in paganism and animism that seem to, and again, it's not in everyone, but there's often, anthropologists will do studies on these Aboriginal tribes, and they'll find that they worship the gods of the trees and the sticks and the woods and the water and all that stuff. But that inside of their lore is another god. And this is a supreme god over the other gods, and then they'll be quizzed, why don't you worship this god, or why is he not in the picture? And they say, oh, he left us. He's gone. He abandoned us. And that is actually common across animistic cultures around the world. So, for example, in the Aborigines in Australia and in Native American religious lore as well. Like, for example, Gitche Manitou. Manitou is the great spirit in Native American, but he's never worshipped, hardly ever, because he's the god beyond the gods. He's not relevant. We're trying to curry favor with the gods that are currently making our lives better or worse, and we're trying to get their blessing. And again, remember, paganism, these gods are not moral. They're not fair, right? It's like electricity, like get it working for you instead of against you. So there is that religion that hints at monotheism being the true Aboriginal religion, but that it devolves into animism as humans have devolved themselves.
So it sounds like a version of the clockwork theory. There was a over God that created it and then walked away.
Yes, something like that. And that it just shows that in their pantheon, there is this nod to a hint of a monotheistic. And by the way, Judaism does not discount the existence of other gods. This may be going to shock the room. So you say, like when people say Yahweh was just one of the tribal deities, blah, blah, blah. It's like, listen, the Jews believed in the reality of the other gods. They believed the other gods were real. And I believe those other gods were real. I just don't believe that they were gods in the sense of one creator, first cause, necessary being, that kind of God. No. They were created things, but they were non-corporeal entities that could affect life, and they could be curried for favor through sacrifice and other things, worship and other things. So,
Demons and angels is what we would.
yeah, exactly. We would, in a New Testament context, we would put different labels on them, and much less controversial. We would call them angels or demons, exactly. But in the Old Testament, they're called gods, they're called sons of gods, sons of God, and other things. Judges, or they have lots of names. Spirits, watchers. They have lots of fascinating names. Okay? And then what is paganism? I think we answered that. So,
I don't know what
animism.
animism is.
Animism is just a form of paganism where it just believes that the earth is animated by spiritual entities. And you just find it everywhere. My ancestors were animists. Yours probably were too. Everybody in this room. Because as I said, it is the primordial religion. Okay? So very cool. Wow, look at that. We handled world religions. Follow-ups on that? Okay, how about we handle a couple more things, and then we'll call it a wrap. And then if you guys want to stay afterwards, you can certainly answer or ask any questions you want about stuff. So I think we're moving on now to sin, hamartiology. It comes from a Greek word, hamartia, which means missing the mark. That's sin. Okay, so we can study sin. And so one person had this question: are humans sinful because of Satan, or are we evil because we're rebellious? Well, I think we should say we should opt with the latter. We should say we're evil because we're rebellious. Humans are sinful first because we sin. And that's important, because it means that we are accountable for sin apart from other things we could blame it on. And that's what I think sometimes our doctrine of original sin does. It says, well, how can I be blamed for sin? Because I've got sin in me. I've got sin from Adam. And I think that Christians should be less obsessed with that idea of original sin and with the influence of Satan, and more interested in, are we culpable? Do we freely sin? And if we do, then whether we were tempted by Satan or infected by some sort of fallibility from Adam is less important. Do we sin because we choose to sin or not? And if we do because we choose it, because we're free, then we're culpable. And that's the most important thing to remember. By the way, strong views of original sin tend to suggest we sin because we can't help it, because we were infected with sin from Adam. Eastern Orthodox, I think, have it right. They reject original sin, saying humans have a, quote, disordered sinful impulse. So they acknowledge that, and I think that's certainly true of our experience. They acknowledge we have a disordered sinful influence as a consequence of Adam's fall, but we're still free to choose God with the assistance of divine grace. So we have to, I think, hang on to the existence of real freedom. We have free will. That then, bad news, we're culpable. We're responsible for our own choices. But good news is that through divine assistance, we can have faith in Jesus. We can express faith. So Satan is, as a tempter, merely facilitates our rebellion, right? He doesn't cause it. So I think that answers the question. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Yeah.
With that framework, like what does that look like with the whole sins of a father? You know, like, oh, you have to deal with sins of past family things.
Oh, yeah. So you're talking about generational sin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that probably has maybe both a spiritual dynamic and a very physical one. So the physical one is simply that we will tend to perpetuate the sins of our parents. And some of that's through example, and also if there's a genetic proclivity towards some certain obsessions or compulsions, we're going to inherit that. We can inherit those things. But then there's also probably a spiritual element to it too. And then remember what God says through Moses. If you rebel against me, you disobey my commandments, there'll be a curse up to, what is it? 3 generations?
More than that.
Yeah. But if you follow me, you'll be blessed to 1,000 generations. So we here, who knows, right, how those things play out in reality. We may be living in the blessing that God gave to people we'll never know. Because we're being blessed. We're among the thousands of generations of being blessed by somebody's faithfulness back there. So, but we are, I think, absolutely affected. And now some Christian traditions develop a pretty elaborate theology of generational sin, generational curses. They have to be broken by specific prayers. And I'm less up to speed on that. I think we can take these things at face value. If you've got a proclivity and you can see it in your dad and you can see it in his dad, like there's probably example things going on there. There may be genetic things. We know that, for example, mental illness has a hereditary aspect to it. And I think those things we can pray against and act against. And the beauty is we break chains all the time. God breaks those chains. So to whatever extent those chains are real, and they are real, I think we should acknowledge that. But those chains can be broken. Dwayne.
When I hear that phrase, I think of we live in a fallen world.
Yes.
The sins of the past, we have cancer, whatever these
Yeah.
things are.
Yeah.
They're a lack of perfection. So it's not that we're suffering directly. I'm not paying for my father or grandfather's particular
That's
sin.
important, right?
But our environment has been affected by all the generations
Yeah.
of sin.
Yeah, that's well said. I am actually paying for Adam's sin in a lot of ways, in the sense that I live, like you said, in a fallen environment, but I am not directly culpable for his sin. And the Bible's really clear about that. You will only be held accountable for your sin, not your father's sin. And by the way, that was a development. Like in the ancient world, it's like if you did something bad, your children were considered bad. And the Bible cuts that connection very deliberately. Amy, did you have a question?
I'm just very fascinated by this, right? Because I do believe all those things that you were saying, and I believe things can be rewired, whether it's through spirituality or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And those, like those chains can
Break the
be broken,
chain,
right?
yes.
I believe that is because I was affected by generational stuff, trauma, mental health, all the other isms that I have. But by rewiring things, and having a different pathway, I think people can break those chains.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Some of those chains are like ruts. And if you've ever driven down a road with really harsh ruts, you know it's hard to get out of them. You know, like this, and the car just wants to go right back in. But guess what? You can steer out of those things. And that's that interesting interplay. We've been talking about it kind of all night. If we had a theme for tonight, it was something like this, that we sin and we're influenced to sin. And so those influences are not causative. They're influential, but they're not causative. That means that we're finally accountable. And bad news, we're accountable. Good news, we can break the chain, and with the help of God. Yeah. Okay, well, that's 8 o'clock, so let's end it there. Boy, you guys are great with this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead on my document and cross off the questions that we handled today where we jumped ahead a little bit. And by the way, we can do that next week too. We can jump around to what you want to make sure we handle. Okay, so let me close with a quick word of prayer, and I'll stick around if you guys have questions. God, reveal truth to us. We know that our hearts and our minds are both involved in this. So, Lord, give us answers that satisfy our heart and our mind. We know that our minds seek reasons. They seek evidence. But our heart seeks fulfillment, and our heart seeks touch and peace. So, Lord, speak in all these ways, I pray, to reveal yourself to us in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for coming, everybody. Oh, look who's showing up.